So as most of you probably know, MatPat recently left his position as host of the Theory channels. He didn't leave us empty-handed, however. In fact, we have 4 new hosts to terrorize. While they might be new to hosting, they are not new to Team Theorist. Each host individually has years of experience researching and theorizing, building their skills and proving their competence. I am here today to prove that fact. Hello everyone, today the new host of GameTheory, Tom, is on the chopping block. If you're watching this, Tom, I'm not sorry. Immediately, Tom mentions the prior theories about Poppy Playtime, which I definitely recommend watching before continuing this video, as it is important to understand the context behind any scenario. Let's break this video up into sections based on claims made. Starting with Tom's first claim.
This is far from the first game theory I've ever worked on. I hadn't actually done the math until writing this episode, but it turns out I've written around 140 theories.
This is the most important claim that Tom makes in the video for our purposes, as it confirms that he actually does have the necessary competence and experience to run a channel like GameTheory. In this video, Theory Review, What's Next for GameTheory, posted on GT Live at the 8-minute and 12-second timestamp, MatPat mentions that Tom's first game theory was the What is Pikachu's Level theory, posted in 2021. Tom says that he had also worked on a film theory and a food theory. To support his claim of experience, I counted each and every individual game theory since his first back in 2021 on Pikachu's Level, and I added 2 for the film theory and food theory that he did. I did this by reading the author section of the description and tallying each one that listed Tom Robinson. Before I show you my final number, keep in mind that each episode of Game Theory takes tens of hours to research and produce. Okay, get ready for it. The grand total is 134 plus 2. 136 theories. That is insane. To put that in perspective, assuming each theory takes a week, which some take more, that's 2.5 years of theorizing. More so, the research and script writing segment of this video that you're currently watching took me over 20 hours to finish, and this is just a review of another video which required more work than this one to produce. So when we go into the details of Tom's first theory as host, you are actually watching Tom's 137th theory, so keep that in mind. This man is far from a new theorist. The variety in theories that Tom has worked on also shows that Tom has a truly versatile skill set, justifying his position as host even further. On to the beginning of the theory now. The first thing Tom does to set up the video is admit that the claim of CEO Elliot Ludwig being the prototype was speculative. The theory that Tom is trying to prove relies on the idea that Elliot is not the prototype, and so Tom brings up a very strong piece of evidence to prove this point.
I also found this post from Reddit user Infinite Universe on the Game Theory subreddit that showed a drawing from Elliot Ludwig's office during Chapter 2. This drawing is addressed to Elliot, but notice what's at the top of the picture. Mummy Longleg's arm, meaning Mummy, experiment 1222, had to be in existence while Elliot Ludwig was still alive, so he cannot be experiment 1006. It's basic math.
While I do think the way Tom uses this piece of evidence to disprove the Elliot equals prototype theory is logical, I think he spends too little time on this. To bring up a counterclaim that I haven't seen discussed anywhere, this drawing could have easily been made or sent after Elliot's death. If you look at the words for Elliot Ludwig as well as the lines in the drawing, a very clear difference in line thickness is found despite the colors being the exact same. The lines in the drawing have consistent thickness across nearly the whole drawing. This makes the handwriting feel out of place. This could imply that the message for Elliot Ludwig was written by a different entity than the one that drew the picture originally. An entity that puts more pressure on the page when writing than the original artist who drew Mummy Longlegs. Why am I saying this? Well, although this is extremely speculative, it is hugely important to recognize and understand other perspectives in order to grasp a bigger picture. Although I believe that Tom's assumptions are correctly made based on evidence I'll discuss later in this video, for the sake of argument, let's create a scenario using the same pieces of evidence against this by listening to this audio recording.
Local authorities report that the body of a young boy has been found on the estate of the late Elliot Ludwig.
Tom says this.
Late Elliot Ludwig, meaning that he's dead when the body was discovered, but that doesn't mean that he was dead when the body was placed there. And given how explicit this is, it feels like the devs are trying very clearly to show us that he knew what was going on.
Due to the fact that interpreting this recording relies heavily on the viewer's opinion, it can be spun to me that the experiment started or continued after Elliot had died. Oftentimes, people will make messages towards deceased people, and so it isn't hard to conceive the possibility that a disgruntled Playtime employee found this drawing made by presumably a child after experiment 1222 took place and placed it in Elliot's former office as if to say, look what you've done. To be clear, my point is that although the scenario I made up is entirely possible based on the evidence, it doesn't seem likely to be the type of compelling story that Mob Games is trying to write. So Tom's theory being not only possible based on the evidence, but highly plausible based on thematic elements of the game and what would make a compelling story, lends more credibility to his argument. The difference between Tom's theory and another also shows the time and effort Tom has put into crafting his first masterpiece as host. On to his claim that Rich is the prototype.
And who is the prototype? For that answer, we need to take a look at our something old, Rich.
I take it you're not a fan of these plays, are you?
Nope, never liked the feel of it. I mean, don't you think these kids deserve some real sunlight instead of floodlights and painted skies? We're not even allowed to talk to these kids. Isn't that... Sorry, Stu.
Sorry? That doesn't sound like the Rich I know.
Well, trying to stop being so pissed off all the time. My wife says I'm a lovely man, but I gotta control my temper.
Did you catch it? Rich actually cares for these kids.
This sets up Rich's character motivations and displays his personality towards the audience. After this, Tom does some good old-fashioned character analysis.
He outright says how he feels about this place and how it treats the orphans. Underneath his aggressive exterior, he cares for them, and that attitude seems to be working in his favor.
You know, Richie, with my retirement coming up, I'm thinking about giving the role to you.
Really?
And so, there's a chance that dear old Rich here got promoted and was clued into what was going on. And given his love for these kids, I have a feeling that wouldn't sit too well. The problem is, the letters that fell off the sign of the executive slides don't spell Rich or Richard. For him to miss the hour of joy, he would have had to just run away, which doesn't feel in character for him.
Tom's analysis here, paired with the fact that the letters on the floor don't conform to Rich or any nickname for Richard, I checked, strongly support his claim that Rich wasn't promoted before the collapse of Playtime Co. It is possible that Rich was promoted and the name on the slide wasn't changed before the hour of joy, so to make sure this was untrue, I compared those letters on the floor to the names Stu, Stuart, and all the nicknames and variations, as the one offering Rich the promotion was named Stuart. Ultimately, I found that the letters don't conform to Rich or Stu or anything similar to either of those two names.
Now, we know these experiments can lose their memories like Thomas Clark did during the Restoration VHS, but most experiments do retain some kind of core personality traits. For example, Catnap has unwavering faith in the prototype, something he had back when he was the orphan Theodore. And so the prototype being aggressive tracks with Rich's predisposition.
This here is my only real problem with Tom's theory. Tom later goes on to state that the prototype is trying to destroy Playtime Co. in an effort to get revenge. He does this to try and provide further correlation between the prototype and Rich. However, and this is my opinion, it seems to be more so that Rich's main motivation is to protect and help the children, not destroy Playtime Co.
There is one more piece of evidence that I think ties Rich to the prototype in a pretty undeniable way. Outside the Playcare Dome, we can find Catnap worshipping the prototype at a shrine that's built using scrap metal and toy parts. But what's interesting about it is this part right at the front. And in Chapter 3, we find his tape inside the cave next to toolboxes, construction platforms, and builder's lights. Rich was working in construction. I'm saying that much like this shrine is symbolically showing us the prototype and how it's made of lots of toys, this skeleton is symbolically trying to tell us that Rich, a construction worker, is the human inside the prototype.
This piece of evidence makes a lot of sense, as a lot of religions will worship some sort of figure that represents their idol, think the cross in Christianity. So for the skeleton to be a representation of Rich adds more credibility to the idea that Rich is the prototype. So the idea that Rich is the prototype is definitely a possibility. However, the shared motivation of revenge on Playtime Co. between Rich and the prototype makes little sense. Going back to the audio recording where Rich has an outburst, you can see he's only focused on one thing, the kids.
Don't you think these kids deserve some real sunlight instead of floodlights and painted skies?
Despite this, the fact that Rich had an outburst and mentioned his anger issues does relate his behavior to that of the prototype. For Tom to say that the prototype's main motivation is revenge on Playtime Co. doesn't align perfectly with the way that Rich is characterized. However, yes, I am making a counterclaim to my counterclaim. The prototype offering freedom to the toys is very much in character for the desires that Rich has towards these children. This is all to say that the identity of the prototype still exists in somewhat of a gray area, but it is most likely Rich. This idea that Rich is the prototype makes for a very compelling story and acts as retrospective evidence for the idea that Elliot is not the prototype discussed earlier in the video. Okay, moving on. Tom says this.
The extra lore hints it gives us. The song shows the toys prior to the hour of joy, repeating over and over again that they want freedom. This was the reason for rebelling and causing the hour of joy. This is what the prototype was promising that we return. The toys are still here, still serving 1006. They never got their freedom, but why? Well, in the song, we do hear this repeated lyric, an artificial facade from a fraud of a god. And so it feels like Mob Games spelling out that 1006, the only character we know code that has been compared to a god is a liar.
This makes sense if you look at the situation from Catnap's perspective. According to a study done by the International Journal of Alien Psychology, individuals in the cult do not hold significance. They lose their individual identity. Members are forced to morph their identities to that of mere pets. To a large extent, destructive cult leaders employ mind control techniques to recruit members in order to achieve their aims. First of all, the fact that most of these toys are based on animals strengthens the idea that these are members of the cult worshipping the prototype and literally are pets. I want to draw attention to that last line though. The mind control aspect of the cults was the focus of this article, and it was concluded that cult leaders use mind control techniques to recruit and sustain members. This can be drawn parallel to the lies of 1006, ultimately controlling the thoughts and actions of the toys to do his bidding, particularly Catnap. Catnap is the most loyal to the prototype, which makes sense as according to Forbes, cats are the number 2 most popular pet animals behind dogs. Dog Day was loyal to the prototype at a time, but was imprisoned by Catnap due to his disobedience and ultimately was murdered. In cult culture, if you will, those who go against the word of the idol are punished severely or thrown out, enforcing an us versus them mentality within cult members, as well as creating a fear tactic for the cult leaders to use against the cult members. Based on all of these factors, it can be concluded that the scenario we see play out in Poppy Playtime represents a cult, and that 1006 is the main idol of the cult. Warning, the next segment of the video will touch on serious topics such as suicide. Please skip to the timestamp shown on screen if you want to avoid this.
All of them must burn along with this place. From his perspective, this is an act of mercy, at least for the toys. They will finally be put to rest. Finally, they will know peace. Which is why, while Catnap is suffering during Chapter 3's final boss fight, rather than helping him, the prototype kills him and drags him away. He stopped Catnap's suffering.
This parallels an infamous real-life cult called Heaven's Gate. Ultimately, the members of the cult committed mass suicide together as they believed that it would bring them a form of ascension. Call it mercy away from this mortal suffering. Now, I believe that Mob Games is trying to highlight the dangers of cult practices through these parallels. Okay, I know this is like a silly video about, games and whatever, but seriously, if you or anyone you know is experiencing suicidal thoughts or are being abused by a cult or a person or anything in that realm, the best thing for you to do is to tell someone trustworthy. Call the National Suicide Hotline on screen if you're feeling those feelings. I know it's hard when you're being abused to speak against what everyone's telling you to do. I felt it, but even if it doesn't immediately solve the problem, it brings you one step further from whatever the end goal of your abuser is. Okay, serious talk over. So the fact that 1006 and his subordinate toys form a cult dynamic lends even further credibility to the theory that Rich is the prototype, as it justifies the skeleton being used as a religious representation of Rich's human life. This further supports Tom's theory that Elliot is not the prototype, as now it wouldn't make any sense thematically for the story to have Elliot as the prototype instead of Rich if Mob Games is trying to tell a compelling narrative. This is all to say that unless some new definitive evidence shows up, it is safe to say conclusively that Rich is the prototype. Quick little side note, notice how Rich's words are colored in red here, and notice how 1006's words are colored in that same red here. That's no coincidence. Whoever edited this theory did this in order to show your subconscious through colors that Rich and 1006 are alike. But that's just a theory. A color theory. Anyways, so Tom's next point is pretty much irrefutable.
But the big takeaway for me was this last section.
Regardless, I learned something new about you every day. Thank you. You thank me? Absolutely. I learned something new about you every day.
1006 has the ability to mimic voices, and specifically voices he's heard, rather than just voices of the people that are a part of him.
He uses this strong piece of evidence as a foundation for his next argument.
Regardless, I found his presence odd purely because of one crucial detail. He's a child. The factory has been abandoned for 10 years. Any child that somehow survived this long would be at least a tween at this point. And he does have to be inside the factory as well. Otherwise, how does he send us keys to the various parts of the playcare? It also seems unlikely that this is just a toy with a child's voice. Every toy we've encountered, Mummy, Poppy, Dog Day, all have adult voices. So if he was a toy, he wouldn't sound the way he does.
He's right, and there are also other reasons that there should not be a child in this factory. Sometime after the Hour of Joy, the Playtime Co. factory basically shut down, making it extremely unlikely that a child would have been able to survive for a full decade, based on, well, the fact that humans need food and water to survive. Any large corporation overseeing the Playtime Go factory would have definitely shut off plumbing to the facility to save money, cutting off any potential water supply. It is also highly unlikely for there to be enough food to last a child 10 whole years without spoiling in a factory such as Playtime Co. Under United States law, corporations are required to provide meal breaks to their employees, but not the meals themselves. This basically means that the Playtime Co. factory would not have the necessary food on site to support a child for a full decade. Any way you slice it, there is no way Ollie is a human child in the Playtime factory.
Plus, if you go through the game files and look at previous maps, you can find a room in Home Sweet Home called Ollie's room, meaning he was a real child in the playcare at some point, which would have allowed 1006 to mimic him. And here's the thing, up until now, we've managed to escape both the likes of HuggyWuggy and Mummy Longlegs without any help from anyone. Why now do we suddenly need help to get through the playcare? Sure, Ollie does have all the keys to the facility, but when it actually comes to things like puzzles and monsters, he doesn't offer us any help or advice. He goes quiet and just leaves us to it. The only time he speaks to us is telling us where to go next, leading us into more and more danger. The telephone, the monologue, the mimicking voices, it all points to our new friend Ollie actually being the prototype. A fake voice mimicked from a child he once knew to give us a false sense of security and allow us to be manipulated.
This argument is bulletproof. As a game developer myself, I wouldn't make something like Ollie's Room just for fun, as it takes actual time and effort to create things in games. Mob Games is definitely trying to say something with this inclusion, and I think Tom figured out their intentions perfectly.
All in the hopes of fulfilling his goal of burning down the company that has tortured so many people. But after all this time, the prototype, Rich, the once kind man who dared to stand up for what he believed in, he doesn't care who he hurts. You, Poppy, even the children he swore to protect. Their deaths are now just what it takes to see Playtime Co.'s legacy removed from the face of the earth.
Again, I don't see this type of motivation being in character for Rich. However, a case could be made that being turned exaggerates negative features of the original person's personality. In this case, Rich's anger issues. The only reason I don't think this is 100% confirmed, despite the fact that we have 3 very murderous examples of this, is that we have non-violent / helpful toys as well, such as Kissy Missy. Perhaps they are outliers. Anyways, that's a theory for another time. So now that I've hopefully proven to you guys why Tom's first theory as host is absolutely impeccable, I wanted to talk a little bit about why I decided to make this video. So the first reason, actually, that I decided to make this video was I really wanted MatPat to see it. I wanted MatPat to see that someone in his community recognizes the fact that his decision to appoint Tom as host of Game Theory was a good decision and the right decision. But I think the other reason, and maybe the more important reason that I decided to make this video was, I have trust issues, and I think a lot of us do. Basically, I'm a teenager, and when you're a teenager and there are times when you don't feel safe in your own home, you start to develop massive problems. I'm sorry if there's a lot of cuts. This part of the video is unscripted. I'm totally just improvising this part of the video. Maybe I just wanted it to be more sincere. I don't know. Anyways, in MatPat's last video, he talks about the 4 principles of game theory, and the first one of those principles is to lead with trust. And I think that, his theory was definitely what he said it was in the video, but I think another reason for his final theory was sort of like a message to us that we should be trusting the new host. So I hope with this video you can feel validated if you have already trusted the new host, and if you don't trust the new host, you can now. All of this trust stuff out of the way, it would be nice if you could trust me and hit the subscribe button. Thanks for watching.